Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Patrick Walsh. I am the chair of the Audit Committee. A few housekeeping points before we begin tonight. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. By participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting. Please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the nearest exit, which is in the lift, by the lobby, and go down the stairs. Officers will direct you to the assembly point, which is on Shortlands Road. Item number 1, which is apologies for absences. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Pascal Tobaru, and we've also received apologies for lateness from Councillor Alexander. Item number 2, declaration of interests. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to declare? Hearing none, I'll move to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do members agree that the minutes of the previous meetings held on the 23rd of November 2022 are accurate and should be recorded? Yep, Councillor Shivapuri.
No, not proposed. Just a question to the officers. There's a number of actions in the minutes. When do we get to hear the results of them?
Chairman, take that away and pick up the officers' concerns, make sure the responses come back.
Sure, so they can be recorded and brought forward for the next meeting and update on those action points. Sure, thank you. Otherwise, are the minutes agreed? Agreed. Okay, I will take them as agreed. Item number 4, which is statement of accounts for the 21-22 year audit progress report. Can I ask Chris Horace to introduce the item? Also attending for this item is Andy Conlon, I hope I got the name right, from Grant Thornton, who is here. Please, Chris, if you could begin.
Thank you, Chair. I will, if I may, hand you straight over to Andy, who has provided us with an update report on the audit of the 21-22 accounts. Andy is from Grant Thornton, who are our external auditors. I'm sure he'll be pleased to take you through the report, provide a verbal update, and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Chair. So the paper is fairly self-explanatory in that it's a progress update on external audits for the 21-22 external audits, which we are working on the fieldwork at the moment, and also a note on the sign-off of the 2021 accounts, which we discussed at the last meeting. The progress on the 21-22 audit is set out largely on page 17 of your pack, and it reports positive progress. We communicated the plan to you in October, November 22, and we started fieldwork and sampling in November. There has been substantial progress on that. You can see on page 18 and 19 of your pack that it's a fairly challenging project for both teams. So both the audit team and your officers have to process over 600 samples from various areas of the account. So that sets out the scale of these audits. And we've set out that we have completed 75% of the testing at this stage. This was about a week ago, actually, when we completed this paper. So there's been a little bit more progress since. And 15% or thereabouts are outstanding with the audit team, who are processing those. And around 9-10% are awaiting samples back from your finance team. So we are getting through the work. We set out some of the delays in the audit. It is positive progress given the November start. This is outside of the cycle, the sort of normal cycle when either of our teams would be looking to do audit work. We'd usually do it between July and September, and where there's sort of more time generally for both teams. So there is positive progress. And on page 17, we've just set out some of the reasons for the delays, which are accessing items around the general ledger from the council team. We said there that was to some extent outside of the control of the council finance team, and with some issues with the service provider just getting that information out. So that means that we've only selected the journal sample to address our risk of management override of controls a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. That's with your council team. They are being processed, and we will look at that. We're looking at the samples back now and testing those, addressing our queries to your council team. We also had some issues accessing information for listings from the collection fund subsystem. That was due to some heightened business of your team there to give us the information, but we have got that now, and we're processing samples as well. On the audit side, it is a very challenging time for us resourcing wise. We have various years audits for 21-22, which have overrun with other councils as well. It's the same across the whole public sector audit sector. There's been real challenges in the last 2 years completing audits in the COVID environment with people working at home. That is easing off, but it means there's a backlog of work. So there's a lot of challenges in resourcing, which means that our senior team members, especially our in charge level, get divided between different audits and have quite a lot of push and pull on their time. So the in charge has had to work on another audit for a period of the last few weeks, and we expect to get him back onto the land and building valuation work next week to make haste and progress with that. But overall, it's positive progress. We're substantially complete on the field work, and the indicative timetable for completion of the audit is we are trying to complete that fieldwork testing within March to move on to our senior officer file review by myself and Paul after that, which will raise some queries with your team, but then looking to report an audit findings report to the June committee. And thereafter, we'd be able to sign the auditor's report subject to there being no outstanding issues or adjustments, subject to us receiving the adjusted statements from your team. And I just refer you to page 20 of your pack, where we discuss the 2021 financial statements audit. At the last meeting, we communicated to you that there was the infrastructure issue that was outstanding at that point. That has since been resolved. SIPFA have released a statutory override, which has clarified for this sector, for finance teams and for auditors, what disclosures need to go into the accounts and how that would be resolved in financial reporting terms. Your finance team quickly turned around amended statements, which they provided to us, and we were happy with the disclosures and the amendments to the statements. So that issue is closed. Subsequent to that, the audit file was picked by our quality supporting team in Grant Thornton, which means that sections of the audit file get reviewed by a quality support team in order to confirm in a way that they comply with FRC and regulatory requirements. So there has been that final process on our audit file to go through, where sections are reviewed, queries are raised with the audit team, and some of that has raised queries with your finance team, and a few minor amendments to the disclosures in the accounts, which we have been passing back and forth between us. So again, the accounts agreed, your finance team amending those. We're now looking to close those points within the next week, to get to the logistics of signing the accounts, getting the signatures on the accounts. So we're in the closing stages, myself and Paul on our side, and then getting the accounts signed on your side. So that will be within the next sort of week or so. And the 2021 audit will have the line drawn under. So leaving us with the 21-22 audit in June. I'm happy to take any questions. That's all I'd like to highlight.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chair. Not really a question, just to say that it's stated in the report that it is acknowledged the council officers in this area have been very busy delivering cost of living support. So I think we can be very thankful to them for doing that, and the audit at the same time. I think we have to acknowledge it's been a very busy period for all of us supporting our residents.
Just a question to you, Andy. Obviously, you are the external auditor and you do work with quite a number of other councils. In your experience, comparing kind of the 75% rate that of samples have been already returned, is that comparable to other councils of this size?
Yes, I would say it would be comparable, or is faster at the moment than many. There's been a good turnaround of samples on your side in this audit. The finance team was kind of supported by Craig, who was in the team at the time, and he was really quite engaged in returning those samples. So there was a quick turnaround, and then sort of the pressure on our team to turn them around. So I'd say the turnaround was quick. It's obviously hard to compare. You get different finance team sizes, but as I said, we're outside of the kind of core time when most teams are delivering audits. And it's one thing to highlight, it's not unusual at all for there to be 21, 22 audits ongoing at this point. This is quite common throughout the sector. I think about 15 to 20% of 21, 22 audits have been completed or signed off. So it's not unusual. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And then just finally, kind of looking forward to future audits in terms of when you request and when you kind of would expect a response. As you kind of identify, different areas of the council have particularly busy periods through the year. Obviously this year, sorry, should I say last year, having particularly kind of unusually busy periods, would you expect that the timing of when you request would coincide with kind of quieter periods in those different departments?
Well, the 22-23 audit is likely to be happening sooner in the year. So I think our field work will be happening in the summer, late summer, after we issue a plan. That's still to be agreed with the finance team, really the exact time. So I can't really speak on behalf of the Revs and Ben's team and those officers as to when they'll be busy. But the other delay that we discussed, the general ledger, I imagine now that the two teams have kind of resolved some of the technological issues they're having with communicating some of that between themselves. I can't see that being a problem again. That's just one of those communication technology issues of getting information onto a system. So that shouldn't be an issue. I think once we agree the timing with your team, we'll probably be discussing early with your Revs and Ben's team to say when they'll be able to provide the information. So it should be smoother.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. I can see Sukhvinder has his hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me on the committee?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, can I apologise to members of the committee? I had intended to be there in person this evening, but there was a bit of a household illness which prevented me from coming down to the committee. I'm sure you wouldn't want me to attend and spread some unwanted presence to all of you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments on what Andy has said. First of all, I'm really pleased to be able to say that the external auditors and ourselves will be able to sign off the accounts for 2021. We were hoping to do that tonight, but we'll do that next week and tidy up the loose ends on that one. I think the report that Andy has provided is very helpful and gives you an indication of the progress and the issues that we are working to resolve. We continue to work very proactively with our external auditors to make things as easy as we can for them, and the finance team will continue to do that work. We've got a few matters to resolve for 21-22, which Andy has indicated. We'll do that as efficiently as we can so that audit committee can receive the financial statements and get those approved at the next meeting in June. Just a final comment about 22-23. The deadlines for the closure and the preparation of the financial statements is intended to be earlier at the end of May. So we'll work out a plan with the external auditors to make sure that we schedule and work correctly to make sure that those accounts are signed off and agreed as soon as we can for 22-23. Chair, I just wanted to provide some of those comments and assurance to committee that we are working with our external auditors to get things done as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukhvinder. Is there any other questions? Perfect. Okay, in that case, the recommendation is to note the contents of the external auditor's annual progress report. The external auditor's progress report. Is that noted?
Noted.
Perfect. In that case, thank you, Andy and Chris, for your contributions. Moving along then to item number 5, the risk management highlight report. Can I ask David Hughes to introduce the item, who's the officer introducing the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good to be with you this evening. Apologies that this report effectively wraps up 2 reviews of the register by SLT, the one that took place in November, which unfortunately because of my illness didn't come to the committee, and the review we've just done in March. So back in September, we looked at the kind of issues around the cost of living crisis and the economic impact. and how that was affecting risks then. So there were some risks that were amended then. In November, we took account of the external auditors' comments in the value for money report, which you'd received previously about historically the risk register containing too many risks, and we've over a period of time reduced that down. So actually, from November to now, we've reduced from 30 risks down to 22. So SLT has satisfied those risks represent the key risks facing the authority, and that we've got those in a good place. On pages 26 and 27 of your pack, I've just drawn out for you the three areas where we've reduced the risk score since we last brought the register to you. So particularly around the risk 6, which is about the care standards and adults and children's safeguarding and so on. So again, lots of good data there from inspections, which shows that the services are performing very well, which is really helpful. Around risk 16, the financial pressures around high needs budget, which again are being really well managed, and savings are in the pipeline for 24 to 26 to be able to make sure that we work to those safety valve requirements. And in terms of risk 20, the short to medium term budget pressure in social care has again been reduced because the budget's been balanced for 22-3 through delivery of savings, and obviously savings and growth proposals have been agreed for 23-24. We've recognised the increase in risk in scoring risk 27 around housing repairs and contractor performance, and that looks at the national issue there about damp and mould, which every authority is looking to tackle, and looking at the number of improvements that are being made in the repairs service and how to improve contractor capacity in particular, and how we deal with resident complaints. So I'm just going to pause there and happy to take any questions on the register from the committee.
Thank you, David. Do members have questions? Councillor Patel.
Chair, I've been on this committee now for about 9 months. And during the course of those 9 months, on at least 2 or 3 occasions, I requested to see the council's business plan, which I still haven't seen. If I can refer you to page 24, paragraph 1, to achieve, the idea of the whole idea of risk assessment is to achieve the ambitions, outcomes, and priorities set out in our business plan. If you haven't looked at the business plan, to some extent, it's very difficult to actually gauge what sort of risk assessment taking place. Is there any reason why that's not been released? I have mentioned this on several occasions, but nothing's been forthcoming.
So, Chair, if I may, we have sent that previously. I'm happy to send that again to Councillor Patel, because it's something that's published on the council's website. It's something we'll happily share the link again with you to make sure you've got that, Councillor.
Thank you. You'll appreciate that without the business plan. Right. The other point is the whistleblowing arrangements, which you mentioned in paragraph 4 on page 25. That doesn't appear as one of the items in the risk register. Is there any reason for that?
So we have a risk around fraud in general, and whistleblowing forms part of those arrangements. So again, every authority has those whistleblowing, anti-bribery and corruption, fraud, and money laundering procedures in place. So again, I'm satisfied we've got those arrangements in place, and it's there. It's not a high risk, but it's there as a risk on the corporate register because that's something that all local authorities face. But I'm clear it's covered there in that risk on the register.
Councillor Chivot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. You've said a lot of good things, and I think it's great to see this report. It's great to see the risks move down, particularly as we get as members more comfortable with it, more used to it. It's great results. Particularly wanted to highlight, and I know it's a lot of Cabinet Member for Health, who is also the Deputy Leader who's worked on health a lot. And it's great to see the reduction in risk 6, which also says that all nursing homes in LBHF have been awarded good. One has been awarded River Court, in fact, might be something you're familiar with, Chair, CQC rating of outstanding. And I think at this time, we sometimes can be tough on officers and our colleagues, but where credit is due, credit should be given. So yeah, just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you. I have just one question firstly for the Chief Executive. Chief, obviously this is an update in terms of the risk register. Just want to ask, are the heads of departments or the owners of each risk aware of the risk register and obviously the duties and responsibilities to manage those risks?
They are indeed, Chair. So risks are discussed at a team level and at a directorate level. and then at an SLT level. So directorates also have risk registers, and then we build up the corporate register from that. So yeah, we're managing risk right across the authority. The most significant ones are part of the corporate risk register, but all directorates have their individual risk registers as well. So it is quite high profile. They are there to imagine what might happen and what could happen and what mitigations we could put in place to make sure that they don't. But this is very dynamic, as members will appreciate. So yes, it's great when we see things that are reduced because of the mitigations that we've put in place and the performances are put in place. But sometimes things will go the wrong way, but we want to be transparent and discuss the mitigations that we have in place. That's very important that staff feel they can signal when something's going wrong. As the member said about whistleblowing, we encourage a healthy, open dialogue with staff and stakeholders so that we, together can manage these risks and reduce and mitigate them wherever possible. But it's very much an ongoing part of everyday business. And I think David would confirm that,
And I'm happy
independent
yes,
of the chief executive.
Indeed. So happy to confirm, Chair. So we're obviously actively involved in the monthly discussions with the chief executive and SLT around the corporate register, but we meet with directorates on a regular basis and we see and we look at their risk registers as well as part of our audit planning process, and to gain that assurance that risk is under regular review in all the directorates as well. So I can assure you that what Sharon said is absolutely correct. Thank you.
And at one point, Chair, as you know, we probably had more risks than the external auditor thought we ought to, but I think that's healthy as well, because we want to just get everything out there that people are worried about and have a strategy for dealing with all of the issues that are causing concern, or trying to future-proof things as much as possible.
Yeah, so that's one kind of follow up on, is that obviously when we first kind of looked at the register that was identified, it was a little bit large. Do you feel that now that it's been reduced a little bit in size, that it's more manageable, or do you think that having that larger register was more beneficial to kind of log all of those concerns?
I think we still have other places to have the concerns, and I take the advice of the external auditor that for an organisation of our scale, that we are looking at the right risks here corporately, but that doesn't mean to say we don't look at other risks across directorates, because we do. Is that fair to say, David? Yeah. And we take the advice of the external and be in line with other councils, but we are quite on the risk situation. We're not risk averse, but we've got to manage risk.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's good to hear. Are there any further questions? Perfect. Okay. In that case, the recommendation is to note the report. Is that noted?
Noted.
Perfect. In that case, moving along to item 6. Can I ask Maura Mackey to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the progress report for the period November to February. So in there you can see that we've completed quite a few audits, majority of a positive opinion, and it also indicates in the report the progress that we're making with the outstanding work for this financial year, which is summarised in Appendix 2. And this is obviously a moving plan, and a lot of the things that were shown as draft report issued are also being finalised at the moment. So I'm quite happy that we will get through all of the audits that we wanted to by the end of the financial year. So when we report to you in June, I think you'll be able to see the whole picture, but hopefully this has helped you build that picture. Just a couple of points really is that you'll note that the 2 limited assurance reports to schools. We're working with the Children's Services and Education team on perhaps reporting these slightly differently to you, so that you get a better picture of perhaps themes that are happening in schools where there are areas for improvement. If you take an individual school in isolation, it's a little bit distorted when you're comparing it with something like, I don't know, a disrepairs audit or something like that. So we're trying to find a way of better reporting that to you so that you can see the picture of schools more clearly. So we haven't invited anyone here today to speak to you on those audits, but quite happy to go answer any queries you might have on them, or to ask them to come at a later date to explain anything on them. But we just felt that we could perhaps do this a little bit better. I've tried to explain in the summary, in the appendix, what the issues were. There are fairly common areas from the school audits that we've done. And in all cases, they've accepted the recommendations, and a lot of the recommendations have already been actioned, and we will follow them up as we indicate in our report. So hopefully you're comforted by that and you don't feel that we're not being open with you. So that was what I...
And if I could add to that, Chair, so what we're looking to do is to, obviously, because there are a number of themes that run through schools audits, we want to make sure we produce something actually that comes here that helps part of our annual report to you, but also we can send that to all head teachers and chairs of governors as well, so they can see the kind of themes that run through the schools audit work that we do, so they can be then better prepared and put better controls in place when we do come and do the audits in future. So we see this as an opportunity to provide that learning out to schools as well, with help with colleagues in education and children's in particular.
Thank you. Are there members? Oh, sorry. Do members have questions? Councillor Patel.
Chair, there's a new approach which has now been taken of 3 + 9 months plan. I was referred to in paragraph 2 at page 40. I mean, as someone who's experienced in some sort of business, it seems to me that 3 months is a very short span to identify anything and then work towards something larger in due course. Has that actually been tested? Because it seems to me a 3 month, so a very short period. And after that, I would like to ask also about the schools.
Of course, yeah, need. So just to reassure Councillor Patel, so we embarked on this new approach in 2020. So this was some of our learning from the early days of the COVID pandemic, which meant we had to be a lot more agile and flexible in terms of the audit work we could carry out, and actually new areas that were emerging. Yeah, things that the services the council was having to provide for the very first time, which it had never done before. So what we do is we rather than having a 12-month plan which is fixed for the whole year, and we then work through methodically, we talk to directorates every quarter now, and we agree in firm detail the next quarter coming up what we will carry out in terms of our review. And the next 9 months, we also agree in terms of the things on the horizon we would want to do, but we don't firm up the time then. So we've got the flexibility then. We know we're going to do the next quarter's work. That's fixed. We know the kind of things we're likely to do in the following 9 months, and we then meet each quarter to update that and to make sure we have the proper coverage over the year. So it gives us more flexibility to respond to new and emerging issues and risks, which is really helpful. It means we work with the services to carry out the audits in the time at a time that works for them as well. So we don't impact on the delivery of services, but we actually get the maximum value out of the audit work as well. So it's something we've been doing. So for a couple of years now, we've found it actually the departments really welcome it. It means that we have a lot better focus and engagement on the audit work that we do, and we're able to deliver then the outcomes that to you as a committee, which I think is really helpful.
I thank you very much. It's a very good response. As I've said, 3 months to me seems like a very short period. I mean, it goes so quickly, but I hear what you said. It's something which has been tested. The other thing which I want to have a quick word about is the findings at page 48 concerning the schools. I see the remarks which have been made concerning the Old Oak Primary School and the Good Shepherd Primary School. I mean, they are really things worth looking at very closely. No good services received checks were evidence prior to invoice payment. I mean, those fairly serious matters. I hope you agree. What do you think should be done to make sure this doesn't happen again?
So I think it's fair to say that in a lot of the cases there are checks made, but they're not evidenced, and that's the key. We need to be able to see that they are done. And some of the schools do have a very simple process where they've just signed something, but they might not have dated it. So we'd have picked that up as an exception. Others haven't. You don't get the good old goods received notes anymore, which is a bit frustrating. So you can't do all the three-way matching with bits of paper because a lot of it's electronic now. So we are relying on them to evidence something, even if it's an email or something to say that, yes, I got this and you can pay for it. Or yes, I approve this payment. And we're trying to get that message across to the schools that this is what we want to see. We want to see there's a separation of duties, that there is control. There are lots of ways of doing this, but it could be email, it could be a stamp, it could be a signature, but please evidence it, because at the moment we can't evidence it. And that's why we have to raise the recommendation.
And in terms of your second point, councillor, about the assurance about it not happening again. So we carry out with schools audits, just like we do with every other audit, we carry out a follow-up. So we go back and check there's evidence to make sure that that recommendation has been implemented. So again, we report back to you here when that's done, and we'd raise with you then concerns if it was still happening. So again, you've got that assurance to know that we go back and check to make sure that it's no longer the case.
Sorry, just one final point. It says that the school fund has not been audited since 2015. And no records or reports are maintained in relation to the fund. I mean, that's 8 years ago. Is there any reason for that?
So the school fund is not actually the school's budget. The school's budget is the bit which the authority passes on from DfE in terms of the funding for school. The school fund is for things like school trips, photographs, that sort of thing. So typically that's of quite a relatively small value compared to the school budget. Typically what schools have a difficulty in doing is finding individuals who are prepared and able and qualified to be able to carry out the reviews of the school fund accounts. And that's something we find typically that lots of schools do have difficulty with, but we do raise it with them because it's important. They're custodians of that money as much as they are the school budget. So it's important that we raise that with them to make sure that they take appropriate action to have that reviewed, but recognising their practical difficulties with that.
We've also, below a certain threshold, they can have for example, a bursar from another school audit that fund, and we've explained that that's possible in those cases.
Councillor Shivop.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In the other committee, which is pensions, we've heard from schools actually that they were struggling to provide employer information simply because they weren't resourced. I'm in an SME in my day job with 250 plus, one full-time person for audits. We've completed 150 plus ISO 27001 audit, but we've got a full-time person. So my question to you, but you seem to be nodding in agreement already, is how much of a pressure in terms of hiring and resourcing of schools under, because I appreciate a lot of this isn't done, but I mean, when you've got to look after children's upbringing and education, obviously there's things that we'd love to see, but and I'm wondering, for instance, I read about DBS checks and I was wondering, are there any sort of agreements in place where we can support local schools, maybe do some things on their behalf? Do they know? Do they not have time to find out? I think it's often a case of communication, but also just resourcing. They're just underwater, aren't they?
I'd like to think that the schools feel that we're helpful rather than critical. We're trying to help them achieve their ends. I mean, we're very mindful of the resources issues that they can experience. And for example, one of these schools did have a resources issue prior to the audit, which explains why there was a lot of gaps in information, because we couldn't be provided with it because the staffing had changed. That happens a lot. We try to be fair and reasonable about that. And I know that the schools team do support them a lot as well in finance, and the governance team as well. So, I mean, I don't think we can answer all of their problems.
No, and in HR and DBS checks as well. So one of the reasons we look at that is because we know that Ofsted, when they come in, they look at the central record as well. So we're trying to help schools that make sure they've got the arrangements in place and they're getting the support from the authority or from their provider as appropriate to make sure those things are done. But yeah, resourcing is a common issue as well. Yeah.
Just following up on that, obviously, since these issues kind of came to your attention, has there been any kind of but has there been any kind of like training or development of staff so that they are going to be able to in future present auditable accounts to you?
So we don't tend to look at things as black and white as accounts. It's a number of different areas that we look at. We cover governance, we cover pay, we cover expenditure, income, and it's mostly about process. We do tell them in advance what we're going to be looking at. We tell them what records we want to see. Obviously, in these particular cases, there were some gaps, but I find that the finance team are very supportive on financial training. Obviously, all the schools have got a financial management system. That's what generates the information that the school's finance team needs, and they're very supportive of them to be able to do that. So if they've got a problem with the system, they are aware of it and they try to resolve it. And I know there's one particular school which has a different system from everyone else, and it has caused a few difficulties, but finance have been very supportive of them in trying to resolve that.
And I think we also are aware that finance lead on the School Business Managers Forum, which we've been along to provide sessions in the past. So again, this is an opportunity for the authorities teams to help school business managers where there are areas where they need development to be able to improve on the work they do as well.
And in terms of that finance system, because one of the things you mentioned there is staff turnover being one of the barriers to being able to of auditing here. In that finance system that's in place now, is it sort of is there some sort of security in place for that turnover so that somebody that coming into that role, that position, is able to more seamlessly take over?
I think there's a couple of points there. So the one is that they pretty much all use the same system. I think so actually from a transfer of skills point of view, if people move between schools, that's actually quite helpful. But each school has a separate instance of that software, so that it's controlled by the school. So as with all their systems, it will be controlled by someone at school to give access to that system, so that they can then do that. As people leave and people join, they will make sure the relevant people have access to the relevant parts of the system to do the work. But that fact it's the same system across most schools helps with that knowledge moving from one school to another.
And just in terms of the schools that are not using that system, I believe more you identify that there is one school that comes to your mind that isn't using it and that's kind of run into some issues. Have you been given any sort of an explanation as to why those schools, or even that school in particular, have chosen to opt out of the financial management system that most schools are using across the borough?
I'm trying to recall if I was told the actual reason, but they obviously the schools make their own decisions. It's their budget and it's their decision. They chose a more commercial accounting system, which wasn't quite set up in the same way as you'd expect, perhaps for a school, for things like VAT reporting and stuff like that. I don't really know why. Maybe because it was quite accessible and you could buy it off the shelf. And you perhaps didn't need to buy into some support. I don't actually know the full reasons for that, but it has been a bit tricky because it's not set up in the same way. So.
But so my final question really is, do you believe that the system that they do have in place will allow them to be audited?
Yeah, we have audited them. I think the struggle is that they are not necessarily as quick to do certain financial returns that they need to do because of the reporting not being quite as stream. It's not focused on a school type of report. So that's the area that they struggled with, but we've been able to audit it, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Chivot-Verdier?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on one of the points you made earlier. And I think it's that I knew about one of those two schools from a point of view of the Pensions Committee, because I knew the Labour pressures they'd been under. I think it would have been great to have maybe touched on that in the report to give members a sort of bit more background info as to, so I think basically you can train someone up to a level, we've all experienced that, and then they leave and you have to do double the work again. We've been cut off from a labour market of 450 million people recently, which doesn't help, and the labour market is super competitive. So just a note maybe to say that when schools actually, which I think a lot of this is explained by that, are under labour shortages and pressure, I think it's just great to touch on it a little bit, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, that's fine. We can make that note going forward, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Patel.
Yeah, just one small point about the audit on disrepair claims. It was last reported in September 2022. Has there been any further development since then, or what's the present position?
We will be undertaking a follow-up. It's not happened yet, but we will be undertaking follow-up. But we know there's progress definitely being made there.
Indeed, and we'll report that back here when we complete the follow-up.
From having worked on the foot level, as it were, I expect there'll be quite a few items to report on, because it's I know especially in my constituents in Sands End, there are a lot of disrepair issues, and I'm not sure what percentage of those actually result in a legal claim.
So we'll take that away.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, do members, oh, sorry, Councillor Alexander.
You can hear me probably without that. Yeah, thank you. And it really couples with what Councillor Patel was just asking about, except this is with major projects, and we say that the risk from them is satisfactory. However, on the ground level, we do find issues falling out of capital projects that have actually caused repairs or have a link to the repairs in the way that they've done. And there never seems to be any follow-up to that. It just gets either handed over to DLO to do it as a normal repair, or it gets put onto the normal housing repair teams to deal with those. And there doesn't seem to be any follow-up. I hope I'm wrong.
Certainly, I would expect that through contract management to happen. If there are capital works being carried out, that would be taken with the contractors. If there are specific examples, Councillor Alexander, which you can share with us, I'm happy we take that away and come back with some responses for you.
Thank you. I'll send you some examples.
Thank you. In that case, do members note the report? Perfect. Moving on to item 7, the internal audit plan for 23-24. And can I ask Maura Mackey to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. So this touches on the point that Councillor Patel mentioned about how we do our audit plan. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is a 3 + 9 month plan. What we have is a strategy whereby we identify what we consider to be common or thematic risks in the sector, and how we identify how often we'd like to audit in those areas. So that's that sits there behind everything. We also have a record of all the audit work we've done so that we can keep track of how proactive we are. But on top of that, we do have these now quarterly meetings with the departments to see what's worrying them, what's on their risk registers, what's the most significant issue that they would like us to look at and give them some assurances on. So we blend all of that together into our plan. And at the moment, it is called a draft plan. It's almost like a rolling draft, I'm afraid, but I will ensure that you get a fairly good draft for the first 3 months at the next meeting. But this is pretty close. I think I'd had a couple of meetings outstanding when I prepared this, but it is fairly comprehensive for the first quarter down to specific audits. But I would say that from quarter 2 to quarter 4, there's some specifics in there, but there are some more general ones which I can't firm up yet. And it is a moving plan, and you should be able to tell at the end of the year. And I'm sure some of you would want to do this to see what did I say at the beginning of the year and see where we got to. And I should be able to explain to you how I got to where I got to. And also we obviously welcome any contributions from yourselves as to areas that you're concerned about that don't seem to be appearing on the plan.
And just to add to it, Chair, in the preceding report, we do try and do that in the last appendix to try and show you how the plan has moved over the years. So again, you hopefully can see how and track how where items were originally suggested or were in that have moved or have been deferred or whatever. So you've got that visibility there as well. But happy if we can enhance that particular on that report to help you, more than happy to take any comments or suggestions on that as well at any point.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members? Councillor Chivot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting. Just to say about the information management technology aspect, obviously, there's a plan to reform our data protection regime with DPDI2, which is in Parliament now. I was wondering whether your audit plan also includes, maybe that's a mistake from my part, but just also to look at how carelessness from staff, but that's not always intentional, such as I'm leaving my computer on whilst I'm going to get a cup of tea and then someone finds PI on it, you know, or just glances at a casework and there's PI about someone's health or anything else, sort of to bring that in scope. I'm also mindful not to bring too much in scope because you actually want it to be targeted and find those areas of malpractice, if we can call it that.
So that's very, very helpful, Councillor. So we work closely with colleagues in information governance, the information governance team, who actually do work like that on a regular basis to both raise awareness with staff and to look for issues around non-compliance along the lines of which you mentioned. So we'll pick up with them in terms of the work they do, because I think that's really important to feed in and to give you that visibility as well about how that's done. So yeah, things like physical checks on how people enter into buildings, have they got passes, that sort of thing. Or as you say, are computers left on unattended, are files left on desks overnight? Those are the things that, you know, the organisation does check periodically to make sure that that's not happening, to sharpen practice.
So to be sure that would come out in one of those audits, we'd see about that.
Well, we can think about how we do that in one of the audits going forward. I can certainly get some briefing for you on the work the information governance team does as well, because they're that first line of defence to do that. Yep.
Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to that, digital colleagues will always be looking for digital solutions as well. So particularly on the issue that you've raised, the genuine worry we'd have if people walk away from something that's visible, very quickly the password protection clicks in. So we're always looking at ways to support colleagues to do the right thing. But I think some of the digital solutions do help us with that. Constant reminders go out to staff to try and prompt them and help them avoid making errors. And obviously that's the sort of thing that David and colleagues would be looking at as well. But constantly we are being very security conscious, Chair. Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that, I mean, the easiest one is obviously Windows L to lock your screen as you walk away. Is that something that's been, is that just, if I can ask, is that something that's been circulated to staff?
I was going to say, Sharon, so actually there's training that every member of staff has to do every 12 months, which would include those kind of handy hints as to how to protect assets and data. So we can double check, but that's the kind of thing that is covered in regular staff training. Yep.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually seeing an example of that would be great. Could be a good way to.
I'm sure we can sort that out for you.
That'd be cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Patel.
I just wanted to ask about the area of review on the housing, page 56. As Councillor Alexander said, housing stock not being maintained in a satisfactory condition is something which is highlighted again and again and again. And I see that the 5-year approach refers to more frequent coverage of both responsive repairs and planned repairs and maintenance. I'm not really sure what that actually means, but it indicates a lack of urgency. Can you give us more information about that, perhaps?
So what it does mean is it's a key area of focus for us. So it's something we, some areas we would possibly not even come look at in a 5-year cycle because they're deemed to be lower risk. We're seeing this as a higher risk. So something that we need to do more often. And it's something we would do from time to time. We have done repairs audits in the recent past, and I think there will be some coming forward. So I can reassure you that the way we've pitched it there is to be clear there should be frequent audits in those areas because of the level of risk.
Sorry, are you saying that should be one full audit a year?
No, we're saying it should be more frequent than every 5 years. So we can't audit every area every year. So we look at how we do that. We also, when we've done a significant piece, as we've done in repairs previously, following up on the recommendations to make sure they've been done, giving time for those improvements to bed in, and then going back again at a further point to be able to carry out more work. I think what we can't do, I suppose, is which is where you might be going, is be seen to be scrutinising performance on a regular basis. That's something that the scrutiny functions or the PACs would do here at Hammersmith and Fulham. So we're looking at the risk, and the PACs would look at the performance in these areas. So it's been clear that that's why we do them on a regular basis, but not perhaps the regularity you might think in terms of that level of performance. We have got housing voids planned item this year. So again, we wouldn't look at all aspects of housing repairs every year. We'd look at different aspects in different years to make sure we got coverage across the whole piece as well.
Perfect. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. David, with when we find an anomaly in a repair, particularly where it's been reported or closed out, but the repair is still there and it should have been dealt with. Normally, and this is going back a time, they used to just do 5% or 10% quality checks, and that was it. So the contractor always knew he could only get clobbered for 5 or 10% at once, which neither helped us nor helped our residents. Do we have an escalation so that in normal manufacturing and in many other service industries, that if you test or you do a sample of, say, 6 out of whatever the group is, that if you find a defect or an anomaly within that group, you then do another 6, and then if you find another one, you then do another 6. So I'm just using that as it's common because statisticians love number 6, but the so it should escalate, because otherwise you could have a population of 100% defects, but you're only ever going to put right the 10% that float to the top through your audit process.
So through the audit process, I'll separate this into 2 bits: the audit process and the management process. So in an audit process, if we take a sample and there are defects or abnormalities or fails in the testing, we would not test more to see if there were more fails, because we've already identified fails. So we'd report to management on the basis there were fails in the sample and that corrective action needs to be taken. On the contract management side, if fails are identified or abnormalities, we'd expect them to go into more detail in more cases to make sure that they had checked that they weren't. So that's and they'd rely on things like resident confirmation of works being done, residents coming back, callbacks, all sorts of other means that which we'd expect management to put in place. So we will never test 100% population of a sample. That's a 100% sample of a population. When we find errors or fails, we report that, and we expect management to then act on it in a wider sense.
Yeah, sorry, it's okay to just come back to that. Yes, it's not intended for you to do the whole. That should be the contractor's job to do the whole sample. It's more that if our quality assurance or that is 10%, then we ought to really have 10%. We've identified 10% good cases, so that if we've got the first 10% that we've looked at and we find a defect, then we do another 10 in the hope that we will get 10 clear ones and 10 clear ones. And it's not uncommon that that's been the basis of major recalls in factories, major reworks on construction works, certainly with Crossrail and projects like that. They've had to go back and they've actually found that the root cause had been missed in the first instance, and it was endemic. And we've certainly had this before, but I'm going back a long time, and it's before. But it has been something that I've witnessed at first hand, where they've gone around and the projects got signed off on the basis that they did a 10% check. They found 2 that were duff, and they put those 2 right. And to this day, we're still rectifying defects that were done in sort of circa 2010 from the Decent Homes project. So we are, we're still bleeding from that kind of system. So, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Perfect. In that case, is the report noted?
Noted.
Perfect. The report is noted. In that case, moving along to item 8, can I ask Maura Mackey to introduce the report, which is the internal audit charter and strategy.
Thank you, Chair. It would have probably been I should have perhaps asked for this one to go first, because this might have explained the audit plan report a little bit more succinctly. We have an audit charter. We're expected to have an audit charter to be aligned with the public sector internal audit standards. And the purpose of this is to clearly set out the purpose of the internal audit, how we are set up, how we report, and how we measure ourselves against those standards. There's certain terminology used in the public sector internal audit standards, so we've defined those as well. For example, David is the Chief Audit Executive, and you are the board. So the whole point of the charter is really to explain to you how we perform our work, the structure behind it, and how the internal audit process is built up through the mixture of an internal team and some partner providers as well. So it's refreshed every year. Not a lot changes. In fact, this time the only thing that was a couple of typos that changed, but we're actually asking you to approve it this year because we were meant to be having a peer review, which is also mentioned in here, whereby one of the members of the London Audit Group, which is another London borough, will review our works and practices to make sure that we are complying with what we say we are doing, so that you can be satisfied that your audit service is being delivered in the most appropriate way and in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. And it is an expectation for us to do that every 5 years. So that's why I'm asking you to approve it this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Chivot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a great document to read. Will this be available to members of the public?
So this is already published as part of the agenda, so it is, but I take your point about whether we could find somewhere else on the council website to promote it more clearly, I suppose. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know,
Yeah,
we're
indeed,
very much a sort of Scandinavian democracy borough, so
Yeah.
fabulous, yeah.
Perfect. Are there any further questions? Councillor Patel.
I noticed that the contribution has been made by the chair of the audit committee. But I'm just wondering whether it should be opened up to all the members, because as identified, it's a very key document of principle, and perhaps we all have some sort of input into it. Under 9.1.
I'm sure members can feed into myself as chair to make a representation on behalf of members of the committee. So if there is any contributions that members feel should be included, by all means, please do inform me, and I will be sure to include them in the representations being made.
Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Are there any further queries or questions? Right. Now, in that case, is the item approved?
Approved.
Approved. Okay, I'll take the item as approved. Thank you very much. Which means that we move to our final item for tonight, which is the dates of future meetings. And that is just to note. Is that noted?
Thank you indeed.
Perfect. In that case, I'd like to thank all members and of course, David, Moira and Sharon for joining us this evening, as well as David, for their contribution.